All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Welcome back to our few regular followers. Hope you had a good laugh at Grandpa trying to figure out how the internet was time. Uh, is that episode up yet?
Yeah, it's up. It's up.
Okay,
Well,
so
you know what? I didn't even check to see if that it passed the edit. Uh,
but now Grandpa is going to rant about some things. Um, we'll start with the grumpy stuff, and then we'll end on some lighter notes with some
yeah,
football thoughts. All right,
yeah.
let me share screen. Let me start with these news stories and then we'll get to the video clip. Um, so you went through a lot of data the last time we talked COVID
hmm
because there's kind of a lot of data out there. I feel like the narrative, which I hate that word, around something that should be purely fact-based, but it is what it is. The narrative is shifting because I think more and more, especially with these Twitter dumps, which aren't there's just so much. Have you seen the movie UHF, Weird Al Yankovic? You're
Yes, many times, but a long time ago.
you get to drink from the fire hose. That's what these Twitter dumps are like. There's just so much. And really, I feel like one of these guys who's dropping all this information, they do good journalisming of laying it out and writing out, okay, this is what this is why it's important, and they do a good job of laying that out. But to really get people's attention and explain it better, I really feel like one of these people needs to be doing a podcast just on this, a visual medium, so you can pull up the screenshots, you can pull up, and then as the audience is looking at those things, then go through, maybe have some, you know, uh Taibbi could do this, and then, when he's talking about the COVID censorship, then he can bring on Dr. Malone,
Well,
and
see,
talk
that's
deeper
part of the
about these.
problem. The median was part of the point. Everybody talks about Musk having control over it from an information standpoint. That wasn't the
Hmm.
point. He's
Hmm.
not really controlling the information, but he did stipulate that it had to be done in Twitter form. So that was
No,
his
and
that
that
was his requirement.
right. But
Yeah.
then there needs to be another step of, okay, here's the dump. Everyone can look at all this
Well,
information,
they all have them on
but
their Substacks.
okay.
So you can
I'll have
get a
to
more
check out
long form
those.
version. Yeah, you pretty much just have to subscribe to like 5 different Substacks
Yeah,
though.
well, I have Berenson's. I am subscribed to Alex Berenson's, but I don't check it
But he wasn't one of the
regularly.
dumpers though.
I thought he was.
No, we've got
No, he
we've
got he
we've
got
got
back
Tai
on,
yeah,
and
we've
he's
got
been commenting on
Taibbi,
it. Okay.
we've got Barry Weiss, we've got David Zweig, and I can't Lee. Uh, this is the one I had never heard of, something Lee, but
Okay.
apparently he's respected by all the others in that same circle, and I don't know why I've never heard of him because I read their stuff all the time.
Well, what I'm sharing here goes right along with the data you were looking at last time, and then what we're finding out about the shenanigans that went on behind the scenes to craft the narrative, and they're still pushing a narrative. Okay, so the there are studies on PubMed about this if you've looked at them or if you want to get nerdy on them. But for me, here's what's most important about this. For anyone who is a political nerd, you know that Friday afternoon is when you dump news that you don't want anyone to pay attention to because no one's paying attention to news. They're getting ready for the weekend. They're watching or talking about sports, whatever sporting events are that night or coming up that weekend. Nobody's paying attention on Friday afternoon.
except
So,
for except for people like me who our Tuesday talks are kind of what I see on Friday because I'm so
mhm,
freaking busy the rest of the week. I don't, kind of
yep.
unwind at the end of the day.
So, unless you are an aberration or a political nerd, you're not paying attention. If you have something as serious as the CDC and FDA announcing that they had flagged a possible link between the Pfizer jab and strokes, That's a big effing deal. You would think you would want people to pay attention to that. Well, so that's the first red flag to me. And then the next one, I was trying to find the actual FDA links, but
And
um
this one I have a little beef with because 24 hours later they came out and said, yeah, but it's not likely.
yes.
And that's the thing. The first thing you did was your job, report the
Hmm.
data to the public. The second thing you did was giving an opinion. That is not your job, CDC. You track
Hmm.
and report. You track and report. We don't care about your fucking opinion.
And isn't it curious, wasn't it the J&J vaccine that was briefly paused when the first news about myocarditis started to come out?
No, blood clots.
Oh, it was blood clots. That's right. That's right. It was
Yeah,
blood
J&J
clots.
is associated with the blood clots. It's the other ones that are the
Okay. So
MC.
that was briefly paused, and yet Pfizer and Moderna have never been put on hold for anything, even after their own trial data came out and we got to see all of the things that were happening in their own trials, that they then came out and said 90 something percent effective, no side effects, safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective. But to your point, yes, 20 less than 24 hours later, they came out on Saturday and said, it's fine, don't worry about it, everyone should take these. I'm sorry. You, in 24 hours, you were able to conduct an exhaustive research into something this technical and this important to say,
Which is
we're all fine here.
impossible because you see the signal and then you randomize a trial to see if the signal is true, and if the signal is bad enough, you halt the public uh release of this thing until the trial is done. That's how it should work.
That's how it should work. But
Even if you come out and give your opinion, you still do it in that order. And looking at that news article you had right there, 21 days seems to be the minimum time that trial should go if that's when the signal is showing up.
mhm.
But hey, what do we know? We're just grumpy old meatheads.
Well,
Brotonian
apparently,
physics, brah.
apparently we don't know anything because Sam Harris says we're dumb.
Oh,
And this is just this poor guy
am
got
I bringing that up now?
Trump derangement syndrome so bad that it has carried over into everything.
Oh, I forgot to do sound. Hold on. Let me stop that.
And
Share with sound.
his
Okay.
condescension about people who are skeptical just completely ignores the shenanigans like this that the CDC and FDA are doing.
All right.
Equation, if if that claim is unmovable, well then
You said about 50 something?
it's
Yeah.
nothing of substance is
All right.
really
So
going to
everybody hold
happen.
in for about
And
20 seconds
there are
and we'll get to
analogous
what it
things
is.
with the topics we're touching here. So it's
Yeah, he's getting into it.
again, I do hold out hope that there are things out in the world that will push people around and will change things. I mean, I think we got very unlucky. Take it back to COVID for a second. In one way, I mean, we got very lucky that COVID wasn't worse than it was, right? You know, it could have been much, much worse. It could have been 10 times as deadly or, you know, 50 times as deadly. And we would have lived through, or many of us wouldn't have lived through something truly awful. But had COVID been worse, you know, just enough worse to really get our attention, to really be undeniable, we would have had a different political conversation around it. There wouldn't have been the same kind of vaccine skepticism. Brett Weinstein would not have been releasing 80 straight podcasts on the dangers of the vaccine if a few variables were changed. I mean, just take that, leave COVID exactly as it is, but just make it preferentially dangerous to children rather than to old people, right? You just flip that around, the variable of age.
How long do you want me to go? Because I have to comment.
Just a few more seconds and we get to the money quote.
Okay, well, let me comment on this and then we'll get to the money quote because I'll probably have a whole spiel on the money quote. That's the whole point, Sam. We were discussing the fact that it wasn't that, and it wasn't preferential to young children, and it wasn't this and that and the other. long ago. That's the whole freaking point. You suppressed information that made it sound like it was worse than it was, or you suppressed information that rebutted sounding like it was worse than it was. It's not
The
that we didn't know it wasn't going to be this benign as it has been. We were following the data a long time ago.
I keep going back to this, that Italy was the first Western country hit hard, and it was a nightmare because they were so unprepared, and they have one of the oldest populations in Europe. And so we found out very quickly and very sadly that that's who it targets, is the overwhelming, I don't want to cite the numbers because I can't remember them exactly off the top of my head, but the overwhelming number of deaths were the elderly.
I'm trying
We
to see if
knew
this
that
has a
from the
date on
beginning.
it.
It's a good question.
No, because it updates as people sign it and stuff.
Yes, I can't remember when that first came out.
Let's see. October of 2020. That was kind of early on in this process.
Kind of early on. And
Okay.
part of what they were saying is we have never reacted to a pandemic this way. Remember, this is SARS-CoV-2 because there was a SARS-1. We did not react this way.
Which
And to,
SARS-1 was less contagious, but was more deadly.
mhm. And that is the entire point of risk analysis. That's why you do risk analysis. And I'll turn it on the right. So remember when there was that tiny little outbreak of freaking Ebola here in North Texas because someone had come from trying to treat the outbreak there in the Congo and had come back with the infection. Well, the right tried to use that to slam Obama because of his response, because they were wanting this massive, because Ebola is so freaking deadly. It's something like 30 to 40% fatal, maybe higher than that. I can't remember. Very, very fatal. And the treatment for it was very rare, very expensive, and very experimental. Well, but
You know who John Wood Jr. is. We listened to one of his when you were down here.
Okay.
He was the one interviewing James Lindsay in that one.
Okay.
Way back.
I didn't recognize the voice. So you didn't have to do these massive lockdowns and travel bans because it's not as contagious and we know better how it transfers. And so they could trace more precisely where the infection had come from, and they could do very quick contact tracing. And so you only had like I want to say like a half dozen or a dozen people isolated. You isolated those people. We didn't lock down the entirety of North Texas.
Well, here's what I want to say to Mr. Harris right here, because I'm pretty sure I can at least hypothetically speak for people like Weinstein, since he specifically targeted him. We can go down the list, but he specifically targeted him, so I'll use that one. If everything he says is correct, I'm sure that those 80 podcasts would have never happened because he is intellectually consistent in that way. But what I want to ask Mr. Harris is, if it was that deadly and all of these things that he just brought up, would he have supported Trump in Operation Warp Speed? Because I'm about to bring evidence that says no. Okay, so now we get to the money quote, and then we'll get to, because as soon as you brought him up and vaccine and the same thing, I had been thinking of finding a way to segue into it for a while, but I had we're getting to the contradictions, not just the dissociation or the my side bias. This is the actual contradictions. But let's hear that money quote you're talking about.
If kids were dying by the hundreds of thousands from COVID, at a rate of whatever it was, 1%, say.
Mhm.
But if it was pretty much all kids, we we would have had a very different experience, right? And
Right.
the patience that there would have been no fucking patience for vaccine skepticism, right? And everyone would have recognized that this is not my body, my choice. This is you're not going to kill my kids with your ignorance,
But
right?
it was.
And
People were
you
saying
change
that.
one other variable.
Mm-hmm.
What if the vaccines actually really did block transmission much better than they in
Also,
fact did?
we would have
Right?
been
And there was
saying
a
different
moment where it
things.
was only rational to expect them to block transmission. Turns out they don't do it nearly as much as we would hope at this point. They just
Almost not
shorten the
at all.
window by which, during which transmission is possible. If they're even doing that now, I don't know. But
All right,
let's say
that's
vaccines really did block transmission, but then nothing.
Okay, I will gut through the whole interview at one point.
because that is just absurd. That okay, the fact that he's setting up this alternate history this isn't just a thought experiment. He is doing this to justify his stance and to somehow criticize the people like Weinstein, who he called out, who have been on this for a long time. But that's the effing point. It's not. First of all, the point is it's not. The point is it is not this alternate history that you are saying. It's the exact opposite of what you are saying, and that matters.
That matters because that's the reason all these other people were saying the things they were saying.
Mm-hmm.
If we lived in the world he just described, they would have been saying something different. They're not political hacks like you, Mr. Harris.
And to add to
Well,
that,
most of them aren't. The
what,
ones he named aren't.
yes,
Okay.
what I believe they would be saying would still be similar but different, because what they are doing is conducting risk analysis based on the data that we have been able to glean, even though they've been hiding it for a long time. Because to his point of, okay, if COVID, flipped the elderly and the young and it was killing the young, okay, well, you do still have to ask, all right, but will this jab help? What is the risk reward? Does it still have all the side effects that we know it has? Does it still have the waning efficacy that we know it has? Because then maybe it's not worth it, even if you have a 1% death rate. Maybe it's not worth it. That's what we've been talking about this whole time, is if you are within a certain age bracket in good health without one of these comorbidities, primarily respiratory things, diabetes, obesity, then you don't really have to worry about its its lethality. You're going to be in good shape, most probably. So we would still be talking about that because we would still need to.
So this is a little over a year ago. It's in between the 1 and 2 years, but it just says a year on YouTube. With a man named Eric Topol, and in this certain episode, he's a frequent guest, but in this certain one, this is where they really just basically straw man everybody in the camp that he was just talking about. So this is again about a year and a half ago. From the basis of we still need this thing because it's the greater good. And anybody who's talking against it is stupid. And if you listen to the whole thing, I recommend anybody, just don't take my word for it. Complete straw man from beginning to end. And realistically, we know now misinformation. And here's why I want to think it's actually lies and not just misinformation. One doctor's campaign to stop COVID-19 vaccine being rushed through before election day. Oh, wait. Who's that again? This is not a right-wing Publication. This is MIT Technology Review.
This I assume that this is just like Times election fortification, that they're not saying what they think they're saying, that they fully believe this is a good thing and this guy's a hero.
Mm-hmm. And he did it with a
Orange Man's bad.
justification of, that's too fast. We won't have enough information. But then as soon as election day was over, he was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, we're fine now. So a little over 2 weeks of delaying the release, because the release was supposed to be before election day. A little over 2 weeks of delaying the release. What I want to ask Mr. Topol and Mr. Sam Harris is, do they agree with our last video's subject matter? I should be back here in a second. Come on. You can do it. There we go. Our last episode subject matter is, these things saved this many lives. Because I guarantee they'd say, oh, that's probably pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the case, you murdered 70,000 people. Time to go to court. Time to go to jail. Because you purposefully delayed this thing that saved that many lives. Therefore, those 2 weeks, that would have been about 68,000 people.
Maybe longer than that, because that article was saying that he
delayed
started these efforts in October.
Yeah,
so,
and they were supposed to be released about the time the article came out, which would have been right before the election. And it was approximately 2 weeks from the original release date to when they ended up being released.
Well, and there were a lot of people that immediately said, well, this is fishy, that the big issue in the election was COVID, and its response, and Trump was making a big deal about warp speed and everything that his administration was doing, and it just so happens that after the election results, just a couple weeks after, oh golly gee, look at that, now all of a sudden Pfizer is making this big announcement.
Either you believe more time should have been taken and they're not as effective as you're saying they are, which makes you a liar, or you believe they're that effective, but you delayed it to keep one man from getting elected into office, so you're a murderer.
And
you are
and
one
also,
of the two.
And also, in which case, Sam Harris wasn't being hyperbolic when he said
he's an accomplice.
Yeah, when he said that Hunter Biden could have literal bodies in his basement and I wouldn't care. Apparently, he wasn't being hyperbolic.
No, and the reason why he has to keep talking like this is because he's not talking about the cabal. He was in the cabal. He was a media figure high up there in this whole system. And you know what it makes me think of? You ever watch a show? I'm pretty sure there's a show like this, and it's the subject of several movies, where a bunch of kids get together and are doing something, and one of them kind of goes crazy, and someone else hits them in the back of the head and accidentally kills them. So they all make a pact to not say anything and pretend it was an accident. And then 20 years later, we have everybody getting back together, and someone's conscience gets the better of them. Who's going to break? Who's going to break? Whose conscience is going to get the better of them? Because everybody was in this, and they're kind of acting like it was just this thing. It was just an accident. I mean, anything that happened, I mean, it's just because we all thought that way. It's not because we were actually working together and we actually did the bad thing.
Something that's going to jump out at you immediately is, in the couple of minutes leading up to where I had you start, he's using one of his favorite straw man of the rigid Christian who believes that the Bible is the literal and true word of the one God. And if that is, paraphrasing him, if that is completely immovable for you, then we can't have a discussion. Then you're too close-minded. We can't. That's who he is. He has. Look at the way you're bending yourself backwards and into pretzels, Sam. That's Sam Harris, not Samo. That's who you are. You are that guy. That is so it is so rigidly stuck in this lane that no amount of fact or argument can move you. You are a cult member.
Makes me sad.
Yeah. Because when he's not talking about this stuff, he's still a smart and insightful guy.
Yeah, when he's talking pure neuroscience, let's go, buddy. Keep going. His wife is amazing too. Her books on consciousness, she's really, really, really sharp and actually a better communicator than he is. So, but no, I'm disappointed. And maybe, you know what? Let's maybe there's a part of him in his head that will finally come around, but I think he's too arrogant. He's always been arrogant. I've never contested that one. He might be too arrogant and prideful to I mean, he's as narcissistic as Trump was, and that's part of the hatred. A lot of times when you're looking in a mirror, you tend to have an extra bump to that hatred for somebody else.
All right. Well, I don't want to beat that dead horse anymore because I'm
No,
already sad.
I think we said everything we needed to say. So either they're lying or they're murderers, or both.
Or both.
Or both. You can't be so dissonant to miss that. To purposefully go out and do something against everything you're saying, that's not dissonance. Now we're talking psychopathy.
Well, I can admit when I was wrong, and boy howdy, this weekend did not go the way I thought it was going to go.
I was wrong on 2. But
So
I will admit I had a lack of information with Minnesota, and I made predictions without going out and getting the information I needed.
As much as I wanted Minnesota to win this game, because as much as I wanted the cosmic karma battle of Vikings versus Bills, someone's finally got to win it unless the second coming occurs at halftime, which I still think isn't off the table. It's just been one of those years. Anyway, I'm not surprised by that game.
Well, Jacksonville's still in the game, and they've never won too.
Yeah. But
and have the Bengals ever won it?
But the Vikings and Bills, those franchises go back 50 years or more. So that they've been around a long time. And the Vikings had some shots before the Super Bowl when still the NFL championship, and they could never win. So
well, what about the Bengals?
That'd be pretty cosmic.
Would they say the 60s is when they came around?
Yeah.
And the only time I can think of they were in the Super Bowl was that 90, 89 with against the Niners with Ickey Woods.
Yeah. So they might not have, but the Vikings and Bills have, 1, been around a long time, and 2, made it so many times.
Yeah.
Had so many chances and could never get
4
it done.
in a row for the Bills.
But
some dude our age in Africa thinks the Bills were the best team of the 90s.
Yes, poor guy.
Yeah. That wasn't a racial joke. They send those shirts. The team that didn't win, they send those to African countries. So,
yep. I heard a stat. I think on Friday. So it was after we had talked and made our predictions that just sealed it for me. That the Giants are going to win that game almost certainly, and it turned out the way I thought it would. So the stat was that the Giants were like top 1 or 2 in play action pass, in gains off of play action pass, which isn't surprising considering their running game and Daniel Jones's athletic ability. The Vikings were like the bottom 1 or 2 in defending play action, and they showed the stat right before the game. The other reason I thought this isn't going to end well for the Vikings is, so there was like, I want to say like 8 years ago, the Baltimore Orioles had this ridiculous run, this Cinderella season, where they had some like 30 something games decided by 1 run or in overtime, and they won all of them. And then they immediately got knocked out of the playoffs because you cannot sustain something like that when you go up against the highest levels of competition. It just, at some point, that bubble's going to burst. And same with the Vikings. They won 11 close games. They went 11-0 in close games, despite having an iffy defense and a quarterback who is never proven that he can win in prime time against the best competition. And that's what it boiled down to, is it was a close game. And then it came down to Kirk Cousins and he couldn't get it done. So this
the mistake I made is, you said it, iffy defense. And for some reason, I just hadn't watched a lot of the Vikings this year. And in my mind, history just always said the Vikings were a great defense. Even their bad years, they had good defenses. And
this year it was weirdly opposite. That another stat they showed at the beginning of the game that made me laugh and feel more confident that the Vikings were going to lose is that their point differential in the first 3 quarters was minus 84. And in the fourth quarter, it was plus 85.
Yeah. And it just, I was watching that game, and it was the first Vikings game I'd watched this year. And I was like, wow, that defense actually kind of sucks for a playoff team.
And that's why, to me, that wasn't really much of an upset. And I think a lot of people thought, yeah, that game is going to, that game's probably going to be an upset. But the true upset I thought was going to happen, and this was the game that blew me away, was they didn't even play it close. It was never close.
No, that was still a good game because it was close until about mid-third quarter. And then
the score was close, but
then the better team just pulled away. No, the Seahawks came out balling. They were ready to go. They were ready to play, but momentum only takes you so far.
49ers
wins.
Yeah. I felt like the 49ers were in control that whole game. I never thought.
Well, I would modify
really
your
after the
statement
first
slightly.
quarter. After the first quarter, I never thought the Seahawks had a chance.
They were under control the whole time. They weren't in control the whole time.
Okay.
So basically, they came out and they fought their fight from bell to bell, whereas the other team came out trying to take them out of their game. And they never did. And then again, ultimately, the better team just pulled away.
Which is what I thought was going to happen here.
That one was the hardest one to pick. And I watched that first half and I was like, well, I picked right. All right.
And then I watched
that second half, and
that was a coin flip game to me. And in that first quarter, I was like, wow, the Chargers finally look healthy, and they look like, I mean, a lot of talking heads picked them to be the AFC winner. A lot of talking heads thought that they were going to make it to the Super Bowl because you've got, Herbert coming along and looking good. You've got Eckler's an incredible running back. You have targets for Herbert. And you have this supposed offensive mind that can coach him. And they were firing on all cylinders in that first quarter. And
not necessarily, because this is the comment. I was out with a bunch of athletes when we were watching this, and they written off the game. They were like, oh, yeah, at that fourth interception, and this is where they weren't firing on all cylinders. Sorry about that, guys. No, this is where they weren't firing on all cylinders. It's because I looked at 4 interceptions and then I looked at the score and I'm like, they've got 4 turnovers, but they only have 17 points to show for it. They weren't firing on all cylinders. That offense was sluggish with opportunities.
That's a good point. They were moving the ball great, but they were doing what the Cowboys have done for years, and why they were always a disappointment, is they would move the ball and then kick a field goal.
So basically the Chargers did in the second half what they did in the first half offensively. They were consistent. They got 17 points in the first half. They had 13 points in the second half. But all it took was the Jaguars to quit fucking up. That was it.
And then the Chargers, that second half, I turned the game off. I was, getting ready for bed. I'm old and tired, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna get in bed. I'm gonna turn on a nature documentary to turn my brain off. And then I went to check the score to see what the final score was, and was shocked that the game was still going and was within a score. I said, what? So I watched like the first quarter and a half and then the last 3 minutes, because I flipped it back real quick and said, what is happening here? How did this happen?
Now, and realistically, I hated the way that game ended because it that last touchdown the Jaguars got, I'm sorry, the offensive lineman went about 3 steps before. It was a clear false start. And this is where it all went downhill. Clear false start, got ahead of Bosa, kept him off the quarterback because he had a 3-step head start. And they threw the touchdown pass. Bosa went crazy because it was a clear false start. Got the personal foul, PF. He got the personal foul, which put him on the 1 foot line for the 2-point conversion, which all he did is take a snap and put the ball over the top.
Mm-hmm.
So that game, we don't know how that would have ended had that false start been called, or had Bosa kept his cool. Bosa kept his cool, they might have kicked the field goal and it would have been a tie game instead of going for 2.
Mm-hmm.
And that's unfortunate because he lost his cool for a legitimate reason, but you still can't lose your cool. It's all part of the game.
Whitlock talked about this a lot on Monday, and I had missed because I stopped watching the game. That ref had gotten in a beef with Bosa earlier in the game.
I didn't know that. I didn't know because I was watching in
yeah.
a sports bar, so I didn't have the sound.
So this might not even have been on TV because it was after a play, or it was when possession was switching, and this ref went chasing after Bosa to have an argument with him. That's really sketchy. I mean, I couldn't find a clip of it, so I don't know if it was even on TV, if it got caught by the cameras, but
well, it doesn't change the outcome of the game, but I do believe repercussions are what fixes it for the future. So I hope there's an investigation. If Bosa said something early in the game that was just completely uncalled for, it still doesn't excuse a ref from taking it out on him later.
Yeah.
You have to keep your cool and then get the league to find Bosa later. That's how that should be addressed. And if you lose your cool and you basically make a call against him later, you didn't make a call against him. You made a call against every Chargers player, every Chargers fan, everybody on the coaching staff, everybody who put money on the game, everybody involved. It's not you against Bosa. It's you against it's you basically being a child.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, he should have kept his cool with the no call and the penalty.
Yeah.
The ref should keep his cool with whatever started the beef to begin with.
And that's where the coach should have gotten involved. Someone should have been over there when that ref came up to, get in Bosa's face for whatever reason he did, and pulled Bosa away and said, "Hey, you got a problem with my player? You talk to me about it."
Mm-hmm. Well, he might have, and he might have said something uncalled for.
That might have just
we
made
don't
it
know.
worse,
We don't
but
know what happened, but at the same time, when we look at it from a professional standpoint, yeah, we're humans, but there's more on the line than just your beef. I would say the same thing to, these, you see these receivers and cornerbacks, especially when you get that shutdown doing basically following a receiver the whole game. How many fights you see from that? That corner is covering the receiver every play, every down. There's hand fighting both ways. How many times you see them get into fights a la Andre Johnson and Cockroach? What is it, Finnegan? Yeah, from a fan standpoint, sometimes that's fun, but at the same time, you just screwed your team.
Trying to see
if there's documentation of what we were just talking about.
Well, Bosa is not being quiet, and so Whitlock's allowed to say this. We're not, because we're pasty. But Whitlock made the point that, and this was before Bosa's comments, because this was on his Monday show. Whitlock made the point that he thought Bosa was in a no-win situation because the ref was black, because of their diversity crap that they're doing in the NFL now. So all this ref has to say is, hey, he dropped an in-bomb on me. And what's Bosa gonna do? What's he gonna say in return? You know,
He said,
nobody's
she
gonna
said at
believe.
that point. Yeah.
Yeah, and very few people are going to believe the white guy if the black guy claims victim and says he dropped an in-bomb on me. I was fully justified in going up with to him to continue this conversation. But Bosa's not being quiet about it. So he said that he talked about them about the official ran up to continue a conversation with him after he complained about what he thought was a missed call. Doesn't mean I need to scream at them or say anything, but how is it fair for me who is out there playing my butt off and there's a missed call and I say something and he's going to run up into my face? Bosa told reporters. What grown man in a position that he's in? Oh, what did he say to me? What did you say to me? Like he's antagonizing me. Oh, he said it. There we go. Got him. It's like, whatever. That's whatever. But Bosa took accountability for losing his composure, acknowledged that the Chargers lost because we effing blew it in the second half, and stuck up for the beleaguered Staley, saying you get the Chargers to the postseason, blah, 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 blah. But according to him, the beef was over a missed call, that he made a comment that the ref had missed a call, missed a penalty that should have been thrown. And, you know, it's, the officiating has been bad for years. And this push for diversity is only making it worse, because when you push that, it means you're not prioritizing the things that need a prioritizer. It's what we ranted about in our predictions for the Wheel of Time on Prime. Is if your focus is, you know, having a cast that reflects today and talking to the modern audience, well, then you're not focused on crafting a good story and adapting the source material faithfully. Same thing here.
I think it's an environmental factor, but I don't think it's the casting. I think it's the fact that anytime you develop a gameable system, it will be gamed.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like you said, if this person made an accusation and it wasn't caught on audio, if he wasn't mic'd up or something along those lines, you can make the accusation anytime you want. He could even be legitimately thinking that Bosa said that. But unless we have a mic around Bosa complaining, which we might, those things are floating around the field. We may have evidence that hasn't come out yet, but it's a system that can be gamed. So this guy could alleviate all responsibility for making a bad call and losing his cool just by saying, well, but he said this thing that's verboten.
That was one of Bosa's other comments is, you know, how did he put it? I think there just needs to be more accountability on, I mean, if I say something to them, I get a $40,000 fine. And then he went on about how nothing happens to them. You know, what accountability is there to them if they blow a big call that, you know, this is why they tried to make pass interference reviewable, and it was a disaster because there was such an obvious blown call in the playoffs that ended a game. And they tried to have accountability, but they did it in a stupid way. And if you want to say, look, refs already get a lot of fan hate and we don't want to fuel that, well, fine. So you can say it happens behind closed doors and it's not public, like when a player gets fined. But we've got to believe there's some kind of accountability.
No,
and right now we certainly don't.
Players would get less fan. This is a bad argument because refs would get less fan hate if they were accountable for their decisions. They get the fan hate because they're invincible. The fan hate is because the belief that they're making these calls based on their personal feelings, not based on incompetence. If you are accountable for it, we can accept the incompetence part.
That's a good point. And it may have been this crew, but one of these refs, it may have been this guy, it was his first year as a referee. Now he may have done other positions, but this was his first year as the white hat. It's his first year as the white hat, and he's leading a crew in a playoff game.
Mhm.
Why?
And this is where the casting comes in, because if it was truly based on, you know, some sort of metric, like I mean, we should be tracking. If you have accountability, we'll be tracking. You can't have accountability without tracking. If we're tracking missed calls, if we're tracking bad spots, if we're tracking how many times has this person's calls been overturned by a red flag, all of these things, then you're going to get the best crew. Unfortunately, that might not lead up to the best equal outcomes.
So
Meritocracy, it's white supremacy.
Did you watch the documentary on Netflix, Last Chance U?
No.
It kept popping up as recommended, and I'm gonna have to get around to watching it at some point, because apparently the coach on it is a really cool guy, and he's on with Whitlock to talk football a lot, and so he breaks it down from a coach's standpoint. And I don't know if he's still coaching, but he pointed out that for years there has been a continuing decline in numbers, which is just going to exacerbate this casting problem, as you call it, because fewer and fewer people want to bother getting into officiating because of helicopter parents and angry expectation parents who, you ruined my kid's game. They don't want to deal with the parents, so they're not getting into it. And if you don't get in on those lower levels, then you never get any experience, and you never say, hey, I'm gonna do this at the next level. I want to do this some more.
Well, and again, this is the balance. So I've bitched about this before: GMs versus players, owners versus players, players versus refs. And this is where we're doing ass backwards inverse Polish notation on this, when we should be doing it the right way from a real human standpoint, human behavioral standpoint. Refs should be law on the field. I agree with that statement I just made. But there should be an accountability system outside of the field that makes sure they answer for anything they do on the field that was uncouth. And the players are more likely to treat them as law on the field if we have that accountability system. Because they know if something bad happened to them, it's just like the religious discussion. How many times do people say, well, they're going to get theirs in the end, because a religious person knows in the end they're probably going to hell? So it's a little bit more of an acquiescence to, I have to deal with this in the real world because they're going to get theirs in the end. Players going to be like, I have to deal with this on the field. I don't like it. But guess what? This is all on camera. This is all on tape. And they're going to get theirs in the end because I'm going to file that complaint.
Body cams for police officers.
Exactly. Perfect. Body cams for police officers.
Have the refs mic'd up, and that should be part of the,
with the
internal
gain set all the way
system.
up, so that way anything the player says to them, we can hear too.
And again, you don't have to make it available. I think, to your point, you should, because if the fans knew too, then it wouldn't be he said, she said, and we wouldn't have to trust the NFL to be making decisions behind closed doors. But they could start it behind closed doors as just part of their accountability system to make sure you're being professional. But the reason body cam footage is available to the public is so the public can have confidence in their law enforcement doing the right thing. So it's been a mess for years, and it's not getting any better because the focus is all wrong. The guy in charge is Goodell's right-hand man, is a big die pusher, and he has said publicly that, I don't remember at what target, at some target of X number of years, he wants 50% of the officiating personnel to be women. Why? And you've already got a reduced pool because fewer and fewer people are getting into officiating at the lower levels, what's the gender dynamic there? Because I gotta think it's way overbalanced towards men. So you're going to be picking from a smaller pool to meet a quota just for quota's sake. Do we think that's going to make the officiating better or worse?
Well, and this is a contention that and there's rights and wrongs on both sides of this argument. From not argument, but discussion I have with people, they see a woman on the in the reffing staff, and they're like, "Oh my god," just because they hate to see a woman out there because it's football. But from my perspective, from the referee position, all you have to know is all the rules and have an eye for it.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest football fans in the world have great eyes because you've been watching football since you were a child. And so that talent pool will be more than players on the field being of different genders. So that's cool. But the bell curves, the overlapping bell curves, when it comes to just interest, the number of people that are interested in this enough to have that eye is lower in one gender than the other. So I have no problem with one showing up, but when you hear statements like, "We want this," we'll never know if it was that person who was on the tail end of their bell curve, or if it was that person that was somewhere in the middle and found an opportunity to get in the limelight.
All right. Well, I wanted to talk about officiating, so we got that out
We
of
didn't
the
get through
way.
all the games. Yeah.
Yeah. But the Dolphins Bills game was another one that was weird. I commented to you before Monday night. I'd sent you a text that said nothing has gone the way I expected. Does that mean the Cowboys will actually win? Well, son of a gun. So the Seahawks game was the most shocking game to me until last night. But I have to admit, a lot of that is personal bias because I'm highly pessimistic in general, and I turn that up to 11 when it comes to my sports teams. And the Cowboys don't exactly have a good track record. I mean, they pointed out on the broadcast that the last time they won a road playoff game was in 1993. And since the 95 Super Bowl win, I think they've only won three playoff games at all. I
Well,
want to
and
say.
here's something I'll stick with. Minnesota had a lot worse defense than I thought they did. But I still don't think they were the worst playoff team in the mix, like a lot of announcers were saying. I think Tampa Bay was. Tampa Bay had a good defense, but realistically, their offense was no better than they've been all year last night. It was just a matter of time before Brady makes a mistake, and he made several. He actually looked bad last night.
The big one was the announcer's fault, as we discussed.
It's not
science.
the announcer's fault.
The announcer curse is real.
They
science.
say that every time he gets in the red zone, and then it finally happens, and you call it the kibosh.
Well, a lot of that.
No, the amazing thing was 4 missed extra points. That was the amazing thing.
I couldn't. That was.
We watched history. That is probably never going to happen again.
After the second one, that's when I thought, yep, they're done. They're going to lose because it's going to be a I really thought, and this is why I was so pessimistic, in large part because of the Packers game earlier in the year. They should have won that game. Green Bay was struggling all year. They had a very young, very mediocre team, but the weakness of the Cowboys defense, for all that it's been talked about as being a great defense, they're great because they get pressure, and that takes pressure off their secondary, which is their weakness. And Rodgers was able to, they mostly ran the ball, but when they passed, they were bombs because Rodgers was able to find the weak spot in that secondary and exploit it. I was waiting for Brady to do that all game, and he never did. That's why I thought it would be close.
That's because they don't have the run game.
Yes,
Parsons was in a track stance every play,
and they were getting pressure in his face. That's the red zone interception. I think I think he was trying to throw it out over everyone's head, but he couldn't because his arm was restricted.
He was not even on his
That
back foot. He was kind of in the air.
yeah,
You know?
he was on tippy toes just trying to lob it out, and you've got a cornerback who's about 5 inches taller than your average cornerback.
Well, and also look where he was, and this is something the announcers never picked up on. They thought he was trying to throw it away, and he just didn't get enough on it. He was still in the pocket. He couldn't just throw it out of the back of the end zone. It's intentional grounding.
He had to throw it over one of his own guys'
He
heads.
had to throw it close enough to one of his own guys that it was still within play and catchable, and he just failed. I mean, which nothing against him on that. I mean, Brady's the GOAT. He had 3 people on him, and he's trying to make a finesse play at the same time. It was a good play by the whole defense. Now, what concerns me, Dallas, going forward is you talk about their weakness in the secondary. That one cat, what was his name that went out about in the 3rd quarter with the knee injury?
Curse. That was the guy that got the red zone.
Yeah, Curse. Yeah, so he's the one that intercepted it.
Mm-hmm.
That looks like, from the way the contact was, it could have been ACL, but that rotation of his knee and that it was a real quick, short motion. Still could be ACL, but most likely, I would say a meniscus tear. So he's not coming back for the playoffs. That's for sure. But the way he was acting afterwards, he was grabbing his kneecap. And if that's the case, and you had just a dislocated kneecap, then once that thing's set back in place and some anti-inflammatories, he should be good. But San Francisco's still going to kill them, by the way.
Speaking of, that is something that makes that Bengals win a little iffy, because the Bengals have had problems with that offensive line all year, and the tackle
they did last year too, and they still went to the Super Bowl.
And the tackle that went out dislocated his kneecap, which sounds horrifically painful.
No, it is horrifically painful, but it's not as damning. Because basically you get that thing back in alignment and you take care of the inflammation, and it's
But could he be back for this week, or is it more like he could be back for the championship game? Okay.
You just want to make sure there's not something underlying that made him more vulnerable to that. But put a knee brace on him with the crossover so it keeps his kneecap in place. You're fine. That's what I'm saying. It's incredibly painful. A lot of the most painful injuries are the least damning. Like, okay, look at Tommy John's. If you have a torn UCL or an over elongated UCL, that doesn't really hurt except for some nagging pain along the way, but until it becomes a serious problem. But if you have an avulsion fracture where the UCL pulls the bone away, that hurts like a motherfucker. But it's it is the best outcomes for repair because it's bone. You fuse the bone back together and it knits, and bone is very resilient. If you have a choice of tearing a ligament or breaking the bone, break the bone every time, because it'll hurt like hell for now, but you will come back just as strong. If not stronger. The bone actually a lot of times heals stronger.
I'm not seeing an update, so no idea what happened to Curse. He claimed in the locker room that
it looked like a meniscus tear from the injury, but from the way he was holding it. Well, and that's the thing. If he even had a slight tear of the meniscus, if the flap doesn't catch, you'll be able to play with a little bit of pain and a little bit of instability. So again, a good knee wrap should take care of that. Now, what happened to, what was the guy that got hit in the back of the head that they had to cart off?
That's a
number 17. What was his name? You know what? I'm going to pause it so we can look him up, and then we can go into that. We looked it up, and we don't have a whole lot of information. They're just still saying concussion and neck injury, but he does have movement in all his extremities, so there's positive news.
Yeah, I was thinking more neck injury, soft tissue injury, just because of the way he was moving while he was down. That's going to hurt a lot from personal experience. And so the way his legs were kind of bouncing, that was someone who was in a lot of pain. But I don't know how much of the concussion part of it. I don't know how severe that would have been.
Yeah, which is weird because getting hit in the back of the head usually it'll knock you out like crazy, but it usually doesn't result in a concussion because that's usually now the brain could have sloshed inside and had a contusion on the front side, but
yeah, but it looked to me like the backer, I think it was well, what's his name? Brain fart.
Van Der Esch.
Van Der Esch was coming in from the side going for the ball, and the way he kind of like got his cleat hung up by the turf monster and fell. And then it looked to me like he got stiff armed from the side, and that's what probably caused the neck injury because his neck bent quite a bit. And so that's what made me think soft tissue problem there.
As long as it didn't affect the spinal column, we're good.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
still
that
missing
you
that
talk
part.
about in control the whole game. You said that with the San Francisco game. No, this one that was truly in control the whole game. The Cowboys were doing what they wanted, except for kicking extra points.
Yeah.
At least he hit that one at the end, so he can use that as his get out of your brain kicker. Kickers are so messed up in the head. I'm sorry. They're like pitchers are the same way. I've worked with a lot of pitchers. They're so messed up in the head.
Yeah. So quickly the other two games, I don't know what you thought, but the reason those shocked me is
great games.
With Tua out and with Lamar Jackson out, I was expecting both of those games to be 14 plus spreads. I was not expecting those to be close. And they were a lot closer than I thought they would be. And it makes me wonder about Lamar Jackson, because the reports are that he's fed up with the Ravens, and it's irreparable between the two of them.
Well, let's go behind the scenes. Okay. So let's look at the little details that they're not reporting in the flashy news reports. Lamar Jackson last year had a major injury, but he was up for re-signing and they offered him a massive contract. But not as massive as some of these other quarterbacks are getting right now, such as
not
Mahomes
as much guaranteed,
and Aaron Rodgers and Deshaun Watson and all of these other big contracts out there. So he made the decision, I'm going to play this year and earn even a bigger contract. Unfortunately, he didn't play that well this year. He was up and down all year, and this is before the injury. And then he gets injured at the end. So he had a mediocre year at best and was injured again. He screwed himself. What I'm fed up with the Ravens is probably, guess what? That contract we offered you last time, 3/4, maybe tops, with the way you played this year. You have to earn more over the next 3 years. And
on the flip side, if from Baltimore's perspective, though, that game was a lot closer than I thought it would be with a backup quarterback,
which is even going to make it now not 3/4 but half. Or
but this is where I wonder, because what I saw were a handful of plays that if even 90% Lamar Jackson was in there, he would not have been caught where Huntley was caught, and he would have made bigger gains, or he would have made a score. And so do you say, look, this entire offense is geared around him, we've got to have him. If we had him, he would be we would be advancing the next round. Or do you say, well, we didn't have him because he keeps getting injured?
Well, but you also have to say, well, another year under Huntley's belt, does he get caught on those plays?
Here's what I think is going to happen.
No,
and you're not going to like it.
Okay, I'm not gonna like it. I have very, very few cares about this whole situation. So
but you will. Because I think the Texans are a dysfunctional enough organization that they'll take him.
Oh, they better not take him at his price tag. I'm cool with taking him. I'm just not cool with taking him for Mahomes' money.
I have heard that wasn't even the biggest sticking point. I think Watson is who has screwed all this up. Or more specifically, Cleveland being so stupid with Watson and guaranteeing 100% of his contract.
No, remember
was
this.
absurd.
Jackson made his decision before the Watson trade, though.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Aaron Rodgers, Mahomes, all of these
Okay.
guys getting huge. Murray down in Arizona.
So
I think Murray was the one that screwed it all up, because everybody knows Murray's kind of a very talented, lazy person. And
Dolphins, I'm wondering if they're going to stick with their coach or not, because yes, you had a backup quarterback in there, but that wasn't all on the quarterback, that they couldn't get a play in and had to use all their timeouts. That's a lot of that's going to be the coach.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, it's his first year. We'll see how dysfunctional they are if they drop him after the first year. I mean, they could be like the Texans, and our last two coaches were a year, including the venerable Lovie Smith.
Which I suspect that they were banking on being able to win the Sean Payton sweepstakes, but I think he's going to go to LA. I think he wants to be in LA. And the rumor
Chargers
was
or Rams.
Well, the rumor was that what's his bucket? McVay, the Rams coach, that he was expected to leave and go into a broadcasting booth to make tons of money with a lot less work, but he decided to stay because the Rams had such a disappointing injury-prone year that he wanted to stay and take another shot at a Super Bowl with the Rams. So everyone expected that that's where Sean Payton would end up. But now with the Chargers losing the way they did, and you've got a young quarterback who's a physical freak, and yeah, you have Sean Payton, the quarterback whisperer and great offensive coach, that there are a lot of people thinking that that's where he's going to end up.
Well, let's see what the Cron has to say about Houston, because we actually last night interviewed Sean Payton. Oh yeah, okay. So the Cron is agreeing with me. Let's share screen here. This is my number one candidate right here. D'Amico Ryans, San Francisco defensive coordinator, who was also our linebacker for like 10 years. Our middle linebacker. So we've got history. He's loved, and he is very good at his job. Let's see. Detroit Lions offensive coordinator. I don't know enough.
He had them surprisingly close to making the playoffs with questionable talent.
Yeah, give him more time though. Give him more time. Thomas Brown, tight ends coach, or his assistant head coach. Okay. LA Rams. Again, a guy I don't know enough about. Oh, Kafka with the Giants. No. This guy I've heard a lot about. Gannon with the Eagles. But we interviewed him 2 years in a row and didn't take him. I don't know if it was because, I mean, let's face it, Houston Texans are the second most woke organization in the league, and we did diversity hires 2 years in a row. But this is where woke and actual caring don't coincide, because they hired them because of the quotas, but they never supported them. They never supported Coley. He was in and out from the beginning. No one ever expected him to even have a second year. And then Lovie Smith, I'm surprised they fired him at the end, but again, it was obvious by the end he was a placeholder. Let's fill a quota while we do a placeholder. Who's this guy? Defensive coordinator, Broncos. No. Steichen? Offensive coordinator, Philadelphia Eagles. I thought the other guy was the offensive coordinator, Philadelphia Eagles.
No, the Lions guy.
He's the defensive coordinator. Yeah.
Okay.
D'Amico Ryans, and then probably Sean Payton. Yeah. So I think D'Amico Ryans would be the hire. And this is the thing. This is the difference between colorblind versus woke. D'Amico Ryans has all the qualifications.
Hmm.
He's young. He's a McVay kind of guy, except from a defensive standpoint. You can build a dynasty around this coach. He's loved by the city already. He's loved by every player he's ever coached. And he's fucking hard as hell. So he's not just so this is the problem with the Dolphins head coach. The players love him, but when he has to put his foot down, they don't listen.
Mm.
D'Amico Ryans is different. He's kind of a man's man. He's gonna put his foot down and you listen, or you're gonna get knocked on your ass.
Yeah, and it's not
Funny
just because he's a big hulking middle linebacker. He's got that kind of Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick mentality. I mean, those guys have been able to do it because they just assert authority.
Well, let's look at a failed head coach that was an old middle linebacker, Singletary. He had all the measurables except for one thing. He had no charisma. But D'Amico Ryans actually can get you to work for him. But he also has that ability to put his foot down and say, no, you must do this. And we will talk about it later.
D'Amico Ryans would be a great pick. I'm just wondering how many organizations, because the trend has been the young, new offensive guys. And if you think you're going to get Bryce Young, or if there's a second quarterback, since you're picking second that you think, or if you think he'll fall to you, I would think they're going to want like the Eagles offensive coordinator if they can't get Sean Payton, because that's the trend. And you want an offensive guy for your new franchise quarterback.
Well, and that's the problem, because we look at the great teams of history. Your head coach needs to be a head coach. It doesn't matter if they're offensive or defensive. And you need the coordinator to supplement them. So look at not Bill Belichick.
I was going to go Bill Belichick because Bill Belichick started out as a special teams coach.
Yeah, that he's a good one, but let me think of a more obvious to what I'm talking about. The dude, Baltimore Ravens, 2000
Harbaugh?
No,
No,
2000 and when they won the Super Bowl with Ray Lewis and Terrell Suggs and Bill, he was an announcer for a while too. If we were a live show, someone could help me in the audience, but
Bill Cowher of the Steelers?
no. Maybe it's not Bill. Maybe it's Brian Billick.
Billick. Okay.
Well, yeah. So I tried to open Chrome. Look what happened.
Well, Max Headroom action there.
Okay, so y'all don't look at me while I'm talking. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. Brian Billick. We had the best defensive team to ever win a Super Bowl, probably, maybe tied with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers under Dungy. Or excuse me, under
Gruden.
Gruden. Yeah. Well, there's another great example, but in exactly what I'm talking about. One of the greatest defensive teams to win a Super Bowl, Brian Billick was an offensive coordinator going into that job.
I forgot that, yeah.
He was a great head coach that hired a defense to complement him. Gruden went to Tampa Bay, offensive coordinator that hired a defensive coach to complement him. And again, one of the greatest defensive teams to win the championship. And then you can spend money on your weakness and you have the mind to take care of the other part. So if we get Sean Payton, we need to find a great defensive coach, which he's pretty good at finding. Of course, they get caught in scandals sometimes, as we know from history. But if we get D'Amico Ryans, well, here's the caveat. We're going to pick your offensive coordinator because we want a great offensive mind, and I don't want you to touch that. I want you to lead the team. And if you want to put your 2 cents worth in the defense, that's fine. And that's the formula right there. It's about complementing. It's not about where they came from.
Yeah.
Like you said, Belichick was a special teams coordinator. Well, who knows about all phases of the game better than special teams?
The league is, except for this kind of the new trend of the young offensive guys, you've got some really young head coaches, more so than you've ever had before. That is the aberration. Generally, the league is very small C conservative. And so the thing I think that D'Amico Ryans has going against him is that he hasn't been a head coach yet. And that's where I think Quinn might have the edge on him because he has been a head coach, and he, granted, it was the biggest comeback in Super Bowl history, but he did lead a team to a Super Bowl. And he's got this Dallas defense looking pretty good.
I wouldn't
So-
complain about Quinn. I would not complain about Quinn. But at the same time, sometimes you have to go with the new guy when they show the same qualities.
Mhm.
And I'm talking in Houston, we're getting freaking tired of the merry-go-round, just from a fan perspective. I would take someone young that we could put 10 years behind and have our ups and downs in the beginning. We're about to have $80 million extra cap room for next year that we didn't have last year. When you see these teams go up and down and up and down and up and down, Jacksonville's going to do it next year because it's Jacksonville. They're having a great year this year, and they're going to suck next year, most likely, because that's Jacksonville's MO, right? Same with Cleveland. Same with all these other perpetually bad teams with a good year here every once in a while. If you hire the young guy and then you put the front office behind him, we could potentially break that pattern, just like the Rams did.
So real quick, before my last thought anyway, who you got this next weekend?
What are my brackets again?
I don't see any way that Jacksonville beats Kansas City. That they're just too mistake prone, and they're not going to be able to take advantage of the Chiefs the way they did against the Chargers, the way they did a few weeks ago against the Cowboys, when they came back on that one and won that one. I really don't know about the Giants-Eagles game.
Eagles, because the Eagles have the defensive talent to actually neutralize the running of Jones, and that's what Minnesota didn't have. That was the thing that they couldn't answer. Even spying him, they didn't have the talent to do it. Whereas the Eagles have plenty of talent on that side of the ball. Then, so I think the Eagles take care of that one. Kansas City, Jacksonville. Let's go back to my thoughts on that one last, because it's easy for me. San Francisco is going to destroy Dallas. It might be a game till halftime, but just like the Seattle
I
game,
don't think, it, as much as I would like to say that, hey, maybe Dan Quinn can do what I thought Pete Carroll was going to do, but I kind of feel like if Pete Carroll can't find a way to exploit the rookie quarterback, I don't know that Quinn is going to be able to, because it's not just exploit the rookie quarterback, it's also exploit Kyle Shanahan, who's a pretty smart offensive guy.
Well, and all the outlets the rookie quarterback has. The best things for a rookie quarterback are a running back that are great out of the backfield, and a tight end that can find space. Those are the two best things for a rookie quarterback, and you got both in San Francisco right now. And even the backup running back he was a borderline Pro Bowler the year before, so he's not bad either. And then add Deebo Samuel to the list, and you got the deep shot every once in a while.
And
that Ayuk guy is really impressing me too.
I'm afraid that so the Dak Prescott we saw last night, which looked like the Dak Prescott of last year, I think he's going to come back to earth and look like this year's Dak Prescott against that 49ers defense.
I think it's similar to the 49ers Seattle game, except the Cowboys score just a little bit more. So mid-30s to mid-20s in that game, but it's under control the whole time. So mid-30s to mid-20s, so we'll say 35-25, somewhere around there. Because San Francisco's defense is elite. But Dak, that Dallas offense is pretty good. I think Pollard has a better day, even though the defensive bet is better. I think he has a better day than he did against Tampa Bay. Zeke, whatever happened to that dude? He just went from 90 to nothing in a year, basically. Let's see. What's the other game?
Bengals Bills.
Bills. Man, this is the game we didn't get to see. We would know more had we gotten to see that game. We would know more about
something I saw that was a little concerning to me in the Miami game, and what I was noticing of one of the ways Miami was able to stay in it. Despite all the talent and the quality of play of that Bills defense, they're really missing Von Miller, because there were some obvious third and long passing situations that they just couldn't get enough pressure, and the young
the
guy
Miami
was able to
offensive
dump it
line
off.
is way better than the Cincinnati offensive line.
That's true. That is true.
On the flip side, Jamar Chase. Okay, so let me rephrase this, because Miami had Waddle and Hill, but Jamar Chase is equally as good, and Higgins is not bad. What's the tight end's name? Guy with a big old beard, but he's pretty good. But Joe Burrow is a huge step up from Skylar Thompson.
Yeah.
And so, yes, he's going to be under more pressure, but he handles the pressure better. So I think it's somewhere around the same. And I think we see something of a similar score. Bills win in a high scoring 30-something to 30-something game.
Wonder what the weather's going to be like this weekend. So when do they play? They play on Sunday.
Now, what the Bengals do have also is they have a better running game. As much as I'd like to see Joe Mixon break his leg, he's still pretty damn good.
So it could be interesting that the forecast for Sunday in Buffalo is for sleet and snow.
Ooh, that changes things a little bit.
that could make things interesting.
That actually skews it to Cincinnati's favor, because they actually have the better running game. Yeah. Oof, that's tough. That's tough. Back to the Kansas City Jacksonville game.
Yeah.
My prediction earlier that the Chargers were going to actually go through and then upset Kansas City was based on watching them play each other twice. And we have a lot of similarities between the teams, but I just don't see Kansas City if Jacksonville gives up 4 turnovers, Kansas City doesn't have just 17 points off of it. They have 28. That's the difference. But if Jacksonville comes out and takes care of the ball like they did in the second half, then we might have a different story. So Jacksonville has a chance in that one. They play good defense. They're gritty. And I don't mind Lawrence. I just really think he's been successful at too many levels to be a loser. And at minimum, I think he's the next Matthew Stafford, which is on a bad team for a long time and then finally finds a good team later. But as it is, I think they got a chance. I hate to be a believer, but Kansas City has weaknesses this year. I mean, the Texans played them to overtime.
So my last thought, well, there was something else I wanted to get to, but I'm not going to. But so going back to last night's game, do you feel that this at all this season, not just last night's game, but this season tarnishes Brady's legacy at all?
No. He's been to the Super Bowl 10 times. He's won it with multiple teams. Nothing tarnishes it. What I would like to see is what happened between him and Mike Evans between last year and this year. They were like they had played together all their lives last year.
I think it was what happened between him and Giselle. Because remember how much time he took. He took off 12 days, completely took off at the beginning of training camp because his marriage was falling apart. And then when he came back, but was taking an extra day off more than everyone else so that he could go back home on the weekends. I don't think they ever had the chemistry.
I would put more weight to that if we didn't have the year before.
She was behind him eventually the year before. So
but I'm saying from a receiver quarterback sinking mode standpoint. If we didn't have the year before, I would say that was all of it. No, his own person, but he was just they were running different routes and all.
That's my point. Is the entire offense looked out of sync the whole season? Every time I watched them, they just looked out of sync. And I don't remember who I heard say this, but you know, the speculation was, hey, it's Tom Brady. Eventually, they're going to figure it out. And I don't remember who I heard point out. Can you in the middle of a season, though? That's what training camp is for. And with the new collective bargaining rules, you have less practice now than you used to. So do you even have time to get your offense synced up and running smoothly? I don't think they ever did get it figured out. And I think a lot of that is Brady didn't go into this year with the kind of preparation he usually does and the kind of focus he usually does.
Well, there's a huge confounding variable. The head coach. Ryan Bowles, great defensive mind. In the Tom Brady Super Bowl year, Bruce Arians. Great quarterbacks coach. Great head coach for quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. So you have kind of a glue that could fill in the blanks at one point. And it's just, it confounds too many things. As with most organic systems, there's so many factors that go into it. But
which is surprising because, yeah, Arians is gone, but Leftwich is still there. So you've got the same offensive coordinator. You've got the same quarterback. You've got, the same two big receivers in Evans and Godwin, and yet that offense didn't look remotely like it has the past 2 years.
Well, and that was the confusing part because Evans has been successful with every quarterback he's ever played with. Mm-hmm. Until this year. Last night, they just looked bad together. They just looked really bad together.
Well, that's the one that stands out because, as you say, Evans is so good and he's been so good, but everything looked bad last night and really all season.
Well, and it kind of kills me that with the way Brady played in New England, he never gelled with a running back or a tight end for the short screen game. Because remember, New England, the run game was the short pass game. So many years with Brady. They never had a true run game. It was always these swing passes, screen passes. The short Gronk was was it Gronk or was it Brady? Was it both? I mean, do we ever see success with Gronk without Brady?
So hypothetically speaking, he's from Northern California. He's from the Bay Area.
I don't see it. I know you asked me this last night.
Yeah, if he wanted to, if he contacted the 49ers and said, "Hey, I want to finish out my career in San Francisco. I want to finish my career back home," what would they do?
John Lynch would probably say, "We'd love to have you, but you're a teacher, and here's what teachers get paid."
Well, the pay isn't the issue because Brady has never been
Brady for many years with New England took a pay cut to have a team around him. Mm-hmm. But these last couple years, he's starting to say, time to get that paycheck.
He's still not but he's still not the highest paid quarterback, even though
because he's 43 years old. 44 years
And because
old.
I think what he's been doing is taking shorter contracts, but 100% guaranteed.
Mhm.
Because it's only, 2 or 3 years. I don't think the pay would be the hang up though. Uh, I think he would be fine with Tate,
No, you don't understand what low pay I'm talking about here.
Oh, okay.
Because they've developed a complete team. When you have a complete team, you have multiple.
See, but I think he's not going somewhere where he's not going to be the starting quarterback. And
Mhm.
so would San Francisco think about, all right, bring Brady in, he plays for 3 years, maybe like he did when in or maybe just 2 years, and Purdy is our future, so he sits the bench and he's Brady's backup. And then he comes out all the better on the other end of it.
But does he?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah, I don't know.
He would learn a thing or two, but is it worth a whole season to learn a thing or two with him at this point?
Especially if you're already winning.
Yeah. I mean, they have 3 starting quarterbacks is what they have. They're going to definitely get rid of one because they got trade value in it. They could, or just the salary cap room. Quarterbacks are expensive, even when they're backups. They're going to get rid of one of them. But at the same time, they have the confidence of saying, Purdy gets hurt or starts sucking, we got Jimmy G. If
I'm not sure if he's going to play again, which I kind of feel like the way he is, his mentality. I mean, he blew up his family.
Well, he also lost $600 million in FTX.
Well, he lost 600 million in assets. We don't know, it's not cold hard cash, but anyway.
Well, he put cold hard cash to buy those assets.
So. Yeah, to some of it, yeah.
He was kind of all in, dude.
But some of it was compensation with the funny money. So that's why he was doing all the ads, and that he was mostly getting compensated with FTX stuff. Anyway, the way he did not have anything else to prove, and yet he could not stay away to the extreme that he blew up his family. I don't see any way he's not. Let me rephrase. I don't see any way he doesn't want to come back next year, but I don't think he'll want to do it in Tampa. He's going to want to, but any other team has to be on the cusp. He's not going to go somewhere where he can't go and immediately compete. And I don't know who else fits. The 49ers fit the best because they're running with a rookie quarterback, and they have a great team otherwise.
Any team that's in rebuild mode but has a base. And again,
I feel like the Texans are too far away.
Far away from what?
From competing.
Again, depends on what they do in the free agency with that extra $80 million.
But even with free agency and a good draft, you're still,
So we talk about
2 or 3 years away.
We look
from
at
being
records in close
competitor.
games, and that was the proof that Minnesota was the worst team in the playoffs. The Texans were the best team to be close to a number 1 pick. Every game except for 1 or 2 were within a score. Every game in one of the toughest schedules in the league.
I don't think he'd want to go to Houston. And I don't know that they're close enough.
No. Look at this. Sean Payton's the head coach.
Now, yes, if they win the Sean Payton sweepstakes.
But that's the thing. This is part of the sweepstakes. The Texans are saying, look, we're going to make a play for Brady. You coach here. That will help us get Brady. You coach here. You can get Brady. And this is part of the play. At the very worst, you get a number 1 pick for the quarterback you want. But we're going to make a play for Brady. If you come here, we got a 75% chance of getting him because we've got these things. We got Petrie. We've got all these defensive things in place. We'll get you a good defensive coordinator. You basically be your own quarterback's coach. That's a play. And there's a lot of teams that can do that.
The only other team I can think of that would be a good fit is Tennessee.
I saw the Tennessee rumors,
And because I don't know if he has any kind of
But-
relationship with
But
what's
Tennessee
his face.
rejected him 2 years ago.
It did.
Yeah,
I thought he
during the
chose
original
Tampa.
sweepstakes.
Okay.
Well, they said they lowballed him and they offered Tannehill $100 million. So that's a rejection. Yeah. So that there is that. But there are other teams that could be on the cusp. Who has a quarterback issue? The Jets.
Seattle did well. Okay, the Jets are completely dysfunctional at quarterback, and yet,
No.
and
And
yet
they were borderline playoff team.
they borderline won that division. Yeah.
Mhm. Or Miami make a play.
And if Brady's getting a big head, which it kind of seems like he started to, maybe he wants to be in New York City and all
Carolina,
the
the way
of
they
that.
ended the year. Carolina's set up to
Yeah,
have a.
I don't know if Miami's ready to move away from Tua yet, but if they
Washington.
decide you're too injury prone, I think Washington's too dysfunctional of an organization. I don't know if he'd want to go there.
He would get a lot of attention if he went there.
Unless they, either win the Sean Payton sweepstakes or get another great coach.
You talked about Detroit being close to a playoff team. Detroit minus Goff with a quarterback that's an improvement on Goff is a playoff team.
But is being a playoff team enough for him? I think they need to be serious Super Bowl contenders right off the bat.
Well, then you basically narrow the way the league is stacked in the Super Bowl contenders with young good quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's my thinking is
you can't. There's no one is going to sacrifice. No one's going to get rid of Josh Allen for a Super Bowl because he's already good enough to win a Super Bowl. No one's going to get rid of Hurts for a Super Bowl because he's already good enough for a Super Bowl.
Herbert, Mahomes, who are the other young guys out there?
Jacksonville, Lawrence.
You got to figure that the Rams are happy with Stafford once he comes back from his injury. They're not moving off of him.
Yeah, but the Rams were as dysfunctional as any of the teams we brought up.
How much of that though was the organization, and how much of that was injury?
They were a complete dud in all facets of the game this year. Their defense was mediocre. Their offense was mediocre. Their passing game was mediocre. Their rushing game was mediocre. Their special teams was mediocre. They were the definition of mediocre this year.
Pretty much everyone of circumstance was injured, and they had some dead cap space still from their.
But that includes the quarterback. So, Tom Brady go into a situation where everybody he needs around him is injured.
Here's the other interesting wrinkle: what happens with Rodgers? Because you could have two going for a sweepstakes.
Okay, so I don't know if I made this
right now.
I don't know if I made this comment on air, but I have made it to people. I would love for Rodgers to go somewhere and then Brady go to Green Bay. And
I was just thinking that. I would be curious about that though, because if Rodgers can't get along with Matt LaFleur, is Brady going to be able to get along with Matt LaFleur? Because that's the big hang up is it's not just that Rodgers is mad that they haven't been giving him, the front office hasn't been giving him offensive weapons, but on top of that, he has never liked Matt LaFleur.
So here's one. Raiders just dumped Derek Carr. Rodgers goes to the Raiders, back with Devontae Adams, and he's got a run game with Josh Jacobs. Oof. And then they build a defense around that. That's a scary team next year.
Because
where do old greats go to retire? Is the Raiders. Look at Jerry Rice,
I thought you were going to say Las Vegas. Look at Fat Elvis.
Well, there's that too. Now they're in Vegas. But Rodgers back with Adams and that run game. All they need is a little bit of help on the defense. But the problem with Rodgers is, I've said this every time, his giant contracts kill his team. and he needs
Or
to
how
figure that
much are you
shit
going to be
out.
able to build a defense if you have to
Yeah.
pay Rodgers?
Yeah, it's great. You the same thing with Deshaun Watson. The way they structured that contract, they still had the team they had this year in Cleveland, which was mediocre. But the way the contract is structured, that mediocre goes to sub-mediocre next year.
Yeah.
Without a miracle of great rookies that come in for almost no price tag.
I suspect a lot of stuff is going to fall into place once someone announces that Sean Payton has been hired. Because I feel like that's going to impact a lot of both Brady and Rodgers where they want to go.
Yeah, Houston's the destination if we bag Sean Payton. But the Raiders are playing for him too. Everybody's playing for Sean Payton that is looking for a head coach. So, but yeah, you know what? One of these years, Brady's going to really decline, which I think he had a slight decline this year. It wasn't dramatic, but I think he had a slight decline this year. But at some point, you're going to have exponential results. And when is that? We don't know. It just all depends on the price tag. With Houston, I like the situation, even as a fan, even though I know the decline could happen because of what you talked about, raising the young guy. Because we could draft Bryce Young and have Brady for a year or two and then work in the other guy, or even a year and Brady's decline shows and then we work in the younger guy.
If you get Sean Payton and Brady, does Watt come back?
No. Oh, we never talked about Watt. Isn't it funny that he's retiring the same year he had to go to the hospital for cardio inversion, which is where they do the modern version of paddling you, which is putting two pasties on you and shocking you through your core. In the same year, we had someone, the first ever NFL player to go down with a cardiac arrhythmia. Just saying to connect it to our first part of our conversation here. And then he say, well, you know what? I can die doing this, so I'm going to go take care of my family instead of I could get hurt doing this. You know, nothing makes you feel more mortal than that, by the way, as someone who's been through it. Yeah.
And for the snarky, I'm an MD and you all are stupid people on Twitter. Okay, well, you know, this will be answered once we get the data, once we get the facts, once we're told what happened. I see a lot of number 3 stickers and a lot of love for DeMar. I have yet to see a story explaining what happened.
Yeah, and that and again, it just was put under the rug. What happened to Watt?
I guess we're gonna find out what happened to DeMar about the time we find out why and how the Las Vegas shooter did what he did.
Okay, so let's end this because I have to pee really bad.
Never had to tinkle so bad.
I still stand by my Bills against San Francisco in the Super Bowl. One thing I was talking about, because I had one of my athletes here watching the games, and we were watching the Bills Miami. I was like, I hope the Bills don't win this easy because you want tape to learn from before the next game. And if the Bills coaching staff is good. They've got that tape going right now. These are the things we can improve upon before we face Cincinnati right now. And if it was too easy of a game, I would be less confident in my prediction. And the great thing about the Jaguars against the Chiefs is you've got tape of a lot of mistakes by the Jaguars. And all they have to do is address those mistakes, and they got a chance against the Chiefs. Because the Chiefs are going to be they don't have any tape on themselves right now. They don't have room for improvement. They've got room to try to exploit their opponent. But if their opponent addresses those weak points, then they have nothing. That's the bad thing about the bye week. Now, San Francisco was dominant, but in the first half, they were shown some tape that they can watch, which apparently they addressed at halftime because they pulled away. Whereas Dallas, that's kind of a toss-up because they dominated that whole game. So they have very little to go to room for improvement in the tape room, and they're going against Philadelphia, who you got no tape on in the playoffs. Is Hurts healthy? If Hurts is healthy, I think Philadelphia runs away with that. No, wait, Dallas playing San Francisco. Hold on.
Yeah, no, it's Giants and Eagles.
Giants and Eagles. Okay, so Giants and Eagles. Eagles is the better team by far, but that depends on if Hurts is hurt. Yeah, he still played with Giant. They played the last game, right? Giants Eagles.
I will remind you though that in the games that Dallas played the Eagles, even the first one that they lost, they were able to run effectively against the Eagles. So there
Well,
is
they got
tape.
Saquon Barkley, so there's that.
There is tape of how to run effectively on the Eagles. So we'll see. But to your point, even if they're running effectively, they'll be able to spy Daniel Jones better because they have more athletic talent on that defense.
Well, the great thing for San Francisco playing Dallas, they just played Kenneth Walker III, who is a great rookie running back, but him and the difference between him and Pollard in the way they run is almost negligible. So you're kind of facing the same running back 2 weeks in a row.
Mm.
And that really helps your defensive scheme.
All right. Well, we'll find out next Tuesday how terribly wrong we were.
All right. Talk to you guys later.